Hi, I'm Jeff Nyquist. This is another edition of Friends and Enemies, where we talk about the primary political distinction between friends and enemies. And that is the primary distinction. Alex has some things about how subversion and influence operations are organized by the Russians, the communists. I'm going to talk a little bit about Senator Joseph McCarthy and how he was blacklisted by history. I'm drawing from M. Stanton Evans' book, Blacklisted by History, how McCarthy has really gotten an unfair shake, and they used this personal attack on McCarthy, demonizing him to basically try to characterize all of those who oppose communism as somehow bad, knuckle-dragging, unintelligent, insensitive, persecuting, thuggish. This has been the stereotype that the communists have attempted to impose on those who oppose totalitarian socialism. And of course, all socialism, if you study it, tends to totalitarianism, as does egalitarianism. It was egalitarianism that made the French Revolution into the terror that it became, and into the military dictatorship that it became, because egalitarianism is not compatible with freedom. Economic control, trying to make everybody equal, is not going to make everybody free, because the idea that all men are created equal, that they are equal, that all deeds are equal, it's nonsense. People are not equal. They should be equal under the law. They should be treated fairly, that kind of equality. But that is not the way equality has been used. And so ideologically, we have this problem, this battle between freedom and equality, or freedom and socialism. And of course, it's pretty complicated because there's many dimensions in politics. So those who want to take over the world, that want to control history because they want to make things fair, they want to get rid of all the injustice and the war and the poverty, run from those people. Those people are going to bring more injustice, war, and poverty, inevitably, because what it becomes is a battle for power. Because in order to make the perfect world, they need perfect power, total power. And ultimately, that ends up being all it's really about. So, Alex, what have you got for us when it comes to this game of manipulating our political thinking?
Well, everybody seems to be talking these days, right? Everybody can get a microphone, everybody can get a camera, everybody has the internet, and everybody is talking. But talking is a very, very dangerous game. Now, I think everybody understands that if you are against any type of real expert, you are in a vulnerable position. And I think most people understand that when it comes to, let's say, sports, right? I mean, you want to play tennis against some of the world's best tennis players, you just not going to fly. But it's also in other professions too, right? So let's say you have a medical issue, you have medical symptoms, and you stand before a medical expert, and he's explaining things to you. He's talking to you about your symptoms and what they supposedly mean, but maybe this guy has ulterior motives. Maybe he's talking you into some sort of expensive procedure that you don't need because he benefits from that, or his clinic benefits from that. You really don't need the surgery, blah, blah, blah. So you stand against an expert. How do you directly, one-on-one, how do you stand a chance? If you're in a stressful position, if you have anxiety, if you don't know what's going on, but you're up against an expert and you're not an expert. Same with shady mechanics, car mechanics. They can fake any sort of problem with your car that's not really there, or they propose the expensive solution that's not really necessary, or some scammy mechanics, they will actually slightly sabotage your car to exaggerate the problems with your car, and then they fix it in an expensive way. So again, you're up against an expert, the professional car mechanic. Or let's say there's so many examples of this, but when it comes to political ideas, ideas about how we are supposed to live our lives and live together and trade or not trade, or war and peace, when it comes to political ideas, everybody thinks they're on the same page. Everybody thinks they're an expert. Everybody thinks they know enough. They know a gimmick to understand it all. But especially in this area, we are up against professionals with significant resources. So you turn on something on the web or on the television, these are the words that you hear that are from professionals, let's say Russian intelligence, and they have all the experts in a team. They know how the target groups function. They have studied every bit of our mind, not just our baseline emotions and how to take advantage of that, but also more complex concepts that we humans have, such as the search for a purpose, or the longing for a just world, or things of that nature. They're more complex. And so the people that are saying this stuff to us on the web, on television, or in any other form, these people might not have originated these ideas, but they just repeat these ideas, and they ultimately come from very, very dangerous professionals. And it's very hard to stand against that. It's very hard to not fall into a trap, because it's like with any other profession, you're not necessarily a professional, but the people that are talking to you, they are professionals. When we covered so many aspects of Russian, especially communist subversion of the Soviet type, the post-Soviet type, the Chinese type, and even the more modern weird mixtures like national Bolshevism, where you just blend some left-wing and right-wing things, and even blend it with some occult ideas or some very strange metaphysical ideas. But isn't it an interesting question of how do the Russians actually determine what emphasis to put their resources into? How would they know what to spend their money on, because they have limited resources too? Because they spend too much on, let's say, the eco topic, creating panic and just making people hate each other for having very different opinions about what the climate is going to be and what we make of this supposed climate science. If they put too much emphasis on that and too little on other areas, that's a losing game. How would they know where to put their money, where to put their resources? And this is when the databases play the central part nowadays. And this is, I think, when the algorithms and the psychologists play a major role. Because I think when somebody like Alexander Dugin speaks, I think he sticks very, very closely to just what works. I think it's very mechanical. It's diabolical too. I mean, he wants to influence people and things on a personal level, but I think he's bound by this Russian science of subversion. I call it the subversion matrix, because they constantly look at what works domestically and internationally, and then they run the numbers, and then they just say what fits this prediction, this model that they come up with. And and this becomes such a problem nowadays, especially in the last 10 years. And I think more and more people are now figuring out that there's something fundamentally broken with the internet. This era when everybody can talk, everybody can repeat somebody's ideas, and there's like a tweet. There's a tweet that says, from a celebrity, that says Ebola was made by America, or COVID is a purely American conspiracy, and that tweet goes viral in a matter of hours. It used to take the KGB years, like 1 or 2 years, to start a disinformation operation to convince people internationally that the United States created AIDS. It took years. Now you can do something like that within hours. And it can come to the audience from 100,000 different directions. Some guy in South America is reposting this, some guy in Africa, some guy in Europe, in Canada, everywhere. So, but people have been doing this now in the audience. They've repeated stuff. They went into these political groups. They've done activism, even some radical activism. Sometimes it gets violent, but nothing really works. And we've hyped up some of these influencers, and they just talk and talk and talk, and nothing ever gets better. And now people are questioning the whole thing, the whole game. Like the internet is fundamentally broken. Every time there's a new influencer out there, it's the same kind of categories that we've seen before. It's the same archetypes of what they present themselves as, and they're the same gimmick, and they say the same things that we've heard over and over and over again. Now, there's some, and I think this is because of that subversion matrix, because it goes along these predefined categories that are popular and that seem to have worked in the past. So what I'm seeing is there's 3 types of political influencers. 3 types. There's 3 gimmicks, 3 archetypes nowadays. 3 types of political influencers. Then there's 2 kinds of content. Baloney entertainment content that keeps you from thinking. That's the only purpose. It's not really about making the money. It's about preventing you from thinking. And the other kind of content is political content, and it's made for you to copy, not to think, not to come up with anything of your own, not add anything to it, not view it in a critical sense, not being an individual. You're just supposed to copy it. So there's 2 kinds of content. And with the political content, I think there's only 5 real types of political content and the subcategories. Only 5. It's like left, middle, right, libertarian, and conspiracy mythology. And all of these categories have been infiltrated thoroughly by especially Russian propaganda. And they have figured out what people tend to be or tend to become conservative or more like middle, being in the political middle, or left or libertarian, or people who get into the conspiracy mythology. Why don't we start with the influencers? What I see is the 3 archetype influencers, the 3 gimmicks. So I think there's the cool dude, there's a supposed super smart intellectual type, and then there's the heated, passionate type. This is what we get. Any character you see, and it's always playing a character, right? Basically all these influencers out there, they're all playing a character. And there's 3 characters: the cool dude, the supposed super smart intellectual guy, and the heated, passionate guy, right? So the cool dude archetype, that's the cool dude, that's the kind of political commentator who's not exclusively doing political content. He's also trying to be about fun things and cultural things, but then he also gets into politics. He wants to be the cool one. He wants to be the one who smokes pot and seem like the type who really understands the world without being an intellectual. Because intellectuals are hokey and pretentious and blah, 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 but he's the cool guy and he understands the world better than, the intellectuals. And he's also not so heated and passionate like the other archetype, because he's supposed to be cool. He's supposed to be detached. He's unfazed, because that's what supposedly makes him cool. And that detachment is what gives the cool dude influencer nowadays, is what gives this type of character the plausible deniability, the lack of accountability. This is the Joe Rogan type, in my view. So when pressured, when held accountable for the political stuff that they do, they play it cool. I'm the cool guy. I'm detached. I'm not an expert. I'm not an intellectual.
I'm Joe Rogan. I'm a comedian, and I'm a kickboxer, or whatever it is he does.
Yeah. So, of course, every influencer out there wants to be all 3 things at the same time, but they can never be all 3 things. They want to be the cool guy, the super smart
Joe
guy.
Joe brings on the intellectual types.
Yes, exactly. So in an ideal situation,
cool guy with the brainy guys who sits down with the brainy guys.
Yeah. So in an ideal situation,
he's got a twofer there. Yeah.
In an ideal situation, he would be all three things combined. He would be the cool guy who smokes pot all day, and the smart intellectual guy who knows everything, and the heated, passionate guy. But he can only be one archetype. So he's the cool guy. So when he's pressured, held accountable, he's not responsible for anything, because he says, I'm just an idiot. I just have guests on, and people have to make sense of these guests, and it's not my responsibility.
Jordan Peterson is the intellectual guy.
Exactly. Now, of course, Rogan sometimes he wants to be the passionate guy about topics. He wants to be the heated guy, but he can never really be that. because he's lacking the real foundation. He's just a rich guy. He's just an entertainer. So it doesn't really work. And then, yeah, as you said, the supposed super smart intellectual type. That's a second archetype influencer nowadays. The second category. And this is Jordan Peterson, and this is also Lex Fridman. Now, both of these guys, Jordan Peterson and Lex Fridman, they have they've overdone it with the Russian propaganda. I mean, Lex Fridman was the one who actually interviewed Zelensky, the Ukrainian head of state. Because people have been pressuring Lex Fridman. You claim to be so smart. Why are you saying this Russian propaganda?
Lex Fridman speaks fluent Russian. I think he's from Russia.
Why are you saying this garbage? Why don't you have Zelensky on? Why not have a real guest on? A real person? Finally, he caved and he had Zelensky on. And every time Zelensky brought forth a point, the Russians have been doing this, the Russians have been doing that, Lex Fridman ignored the point. And then he even tried some senseless stuff like asking, could you ever forgive Putin for what he's done? Could we all love each other? Could you imagine yourself forgiving and loving, everybody loves each other and this all having a good conclusion? It's just, it's bizarre, right? And so Lex Fridman is a guy, and now people have caught on to him. I think he always advertises himself as being the MIT guy, the famous elite university MIT. It's in every bit of description about him, every profile, it's always MIT. And he's got these photos of him in an MIT classroom, standing in front of a chalkboard, full of mathematical equations that I think are not even from him, but whatever. So he's flexing these academic credentials, and people have been trolling him by saying, you went to Drexel University, which is a respectable institution. Your degrees apparently are from Drexel. So why don't you mention Drexel University at all? Why is it just MIT when all we can find of you is some slight affiliation with MIT, nothing substantial, nobody apparently gets grades from him at MIT, and I think he's got an MIT email address. So that's his academic flex. Now with Peterson I think was attached to Harvard at some point, I believe.
Well, he was at Harvard briefly, but he was at University of Toronto, I think, in Canada.
Yeah, and he specialized on addiction. I think that's what his original field was. But then he talked about.
And then he graduated
else.
to writing a book about straightening out your life by making your bed every morning.
Yes, and he at some point he presented himself as a full-blown, ever-seeking expert on tyranny, why tyranny happens, how it functions. So he wants to be the expert on tyranny. So
yeah, he likes to talk about Dostoevsky and Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag and stuff. But the problem is when he went to debate with Slavoj Žižek about Marxism, all he did is read the Communist Manifesto and not very closely, and then went to debate Žižek and got it all wrong.
Fell on his face.
And Žižek was even like he laughing under his breath that Peterson didn't know what he was talking about. And of course, most of the audience wouldn't have known either. But Peterson cultivates this sincerity, and Peterson has a bit of the passionate. But going to the passionate one, would Nick Fuentes be an example of one of these passionate?
It's the easiest group. It's the easiest character to play. It's the easiest character to play because ultimately
it's completely over the top.
Yeah,
somebody like Anne Barnhart, if you know who that is.
No,
the passionate. She burned a Quran. She made a video burning a Quran after bookmarking it with bacon.
How creative!
And a Muslim in London or in the UK got so incensed, he wrote that he was coming for her to kill her, and she famously gave him directions to her house. From getting on an airplane on Heathrow, told her what the best flight to come to Denver, because she was living in Colorado then, and that how to get to her house. And then she said, I have this new body armor I want to check out. So if you come, be prepared to die. but you have a crack at me if you want to come and get me.
Yeah.
That was sort of the Colorado.
So it's a bit hard. I mean, it's a bit hard to play the academic type because you need some sort of academic background, especially if you have some slight, affiliation with an Ivy League big name university. And then you got to dress, you got to be a bit weird because that's what people think an very highly intelligent person
you
is.
You have to have a certain charisma to
the nerdiness, the nerdiness, or the three-piece suit. Or you got to put on the three-piece suit, or let's say the regular suit that Lex Friedman tends to have, and you got to be a bit nerdy or play the nerd type or play the elderly Professor Dumbledore type like Jordan Peterson is doing. So, but I think the easiest character to play, the easiest thing to fake is the heated, passionate rebel archetype. Now, this is the Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Fuentes.
Alex Jones, yeah.
So it's like so they always want to present themselves as being special or doing special things, but everything they say is outdated, very primitive, sometimes extremely radical, very simple and emotional.
Screaming rants, yeah.
Yeah, because nobody would think of them as scientists. Nobody would think of, even Tucker Carlson, I mean, he was a television guy and everything he said was, we've heard that before so many times from so many other people.
The passion is supposed to indicate sincerity.
Yes.
So that you're hearing somebody who's authentic, you're hearing the truth. But the problem is, it's just an act. It's not authentic. Yeah. And this is the thing about Tucker Carlson that you end up discovering.
And they have to fall into one of these categories because not everybody can play any type of character. Now, because let's say Lex Friedman cannot be cool. Jordan Peterson cannot be the cool dude. It's just they're not, and even some of these heated, passionate guys, Alex Jones cannot be cool. Remember when he was so angry when the young generation of conspiracy influencers came up, these Q shaman types, and they were young and handsome and had muscles and tattoos, and they were the talk and of everywhere in the world, and the photo of the Q shaman was everywhere in the world, even in Germany, making magazine covers. And Jones was so mad because he was thinking this young guy is regarded as cool, and I'm not cool because I'm getting older. And Jones was severely overweight at the time. And so Jones, however hard he tries, Alex Jones cannot be cool. Tucker Carlson has that effeminate laugh, and he's also a bit overweight. And Tucker Carlson can never be the cool dude. And Fuentes can never be cool. So you gotta have you gotta have certain attributes to play the cool dude. But when you're the heated, passionate type, nobody's buying that you're an intellectual, super smart guy. Nobody would think Alex Jones is a genius. Nobody would think Tucker Carlson's a genius. Carlson, Jones, and the other types, the passionate guys, as you just said, they have to be passionate and they have to have that gimmick of sincerity. So they may not be super smart, but at least they have the guts, they have the bravery and the passion to say these things that we've heard from so many other people that are so generic and they're just copied from some very evil.
Which, by the way, makes them the most insincere and the most fraudulent and inauthentic people because they are so good at fooling people into believing that they are authentic. And this is the thing that really bothers me. I mean, I was kind of fooled by Tucker Carlson. I thought he was sincere and his passion indicated a certain goodness. But I see in his pro-Russian stance and his slanders against Ukraine and his sharp reasoning, his interview with Ted Cruz just completely nonplussed me because Ted Cruz, who I'm not a big fan of Ted Cruz, impressed me, at least being honest and sincere, which I don't generally think of him that way, compared to Carlson, who I found was weaving and ducking and making sucker punches and saying things that weren't right, treating Ted and his arguments in a way that was completely dishonest, that a truly sincere person wouldn't do. And at the same time, self-deprecating, saying, "Oh, I make mistakes," but it was horrible. It was a horrible experience watching him because I was reminded. I wanted to go back and read Soren Kierkegaard's essay on the modern age and about how publicity is this monster or the public is a monster, that doesn't exist. It's a fabrication. And these guys create publicity. They are publicists. They are people who garner the public's attention. But this public that they influence is a nullity. And everybody does this. Oh, well, we better go that way. And so many people end up following these guys and repeating what they say, even though it's complete and utter garbage. It's nonsense.
Yeah, and people try to also copy the archetype, not just the content that is spoken, rehashed from somewhere else, but it's also people, they seek identity, not just group identity, but individual identity. So people think, as an activist in this shopping mall of ideologies, which is really just 5 categories, really, it's really just 5 brands or 5 products there. In this shopping mall of ideology, when you pick one, what character am I supposed to be? People look for this individual identity. Am I gonna be the cool dude? Can I play the cool dude? Can I play the super smart intellectual dude? Or am I just gonna be the heated passionate type? Because all 3 archetypes are easy to fake. And it's like when
and because the medium is the message, it's a visual medium. We're on this video thing, and so obviously they know the gimmick. They understand the medium. They're exploiting the medium, and of course, this is why radio is better. This is also why books are even better, because the books, you're just seeing the words.
Yeah,
you're not seeing all this histrionics. You're not seeing the voice elevated. If you take what somebody like Limbaugh says. And not Limbaugh, sorry, but even Limbaugh to some extent. But if you take what a lot of these people say, you find the substance is watery. There's not much there. It's not. You'd rather read a book than go on. But yet it's entertaining to listen to. It draws you in because the medium is the message. We are hypnotized. We are fascinated by certain gestures.
And if an intelligence service sends a trained agent on a foreign mission to play a character, to play somebody who doesn't really exist, somebody who has a whole fake backstory, where he came from, what he's doing professionally.
A pompous intellectual.
Yeah, if they ask you to go on that mission and they prepare you for that mission and you go on that mission to play a character, what usually happens in training is they want you to play a character that's not too far removed from your true persona, because that's easier to play. Because if you play somebody who is completely different,
unless you're a great actor, of course.
Yeah, yes. If you have this acting ability, you can play virtually anybody. But for most, even trained agents, they have to stick with something that is somewhat close to who they really are, because that's easier to fake. Now, I think all 3 archetypes, these influencer archetypes, I think all 3 archetypes are easy to fake, because if you want to pretend to be the cool dude, well, just talk a lot about fun things you haven't done. You talk about culture, you invite guests on, you talk about how awesome this is, how awesome that is, but you don't have to be the filmmaker. You don't have to be the UFC fighter who gets his face smashed in. You don't have to make a movie. You don't have to paint the picture, paint the image, paint the drawing or whatever. You don't have to actually do all these cool things. You just talk about these cool things. You point to these things. You associate with the artists. You invite them on your podcast, and you drink with them. You smoke with them, and then they talk about these stories. It's very easy to do. So many people have copied the Joe Rogan model, being the cool dude, not try to be too passionate, because that takes away from the cool gimmick, because you want to be somewhat detached. You want to be like too cool for anything. And so you, as the cool character,
well, interviewing other people is really the cool dude thing is best for that, because then he's following his own interest, and he can ask the neutral questions. He can be cool. It's good to be cool when you're asking the questions.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's really the better for the format. Yeah,
and it's like you can, if you have a bit of training in interviewing people, if you prepare or have somebody else prepare you for the interview, you have enough questions you can ask and maybe get into this a bit more and that a bit more.
That's why Tucker Carlson really has proved to be not very good at interviewing.
This is not
cool. Really, when you see him on his show, when he's not directed by others to how to do it, and he's got no time constriction, you see he's really rather, he's putting his own ideas out there first, and he's going to trample on his guest.
Yeah. So as the cool dude character, you never have to present any original deep work because you can claim to have a distance to everything. You're too cool for anything. You're too cool to be nailed down. And cool people or pretend cool people, they act like they're always at a distance to anything. So but it's not cool anymore to consume entertainment and talk stuff with other people while drunk and stoned. Everybody can do this. The internet has made entertainment ubiquitous. Any child can have all day entertainment on their phone wherever they go. It's everywhere, and we've seen the same guests on on so many shows now. It's telling the very same stories. It was maybe a little bit special entertainment wise, 10 years ago or 15 years ago when Joe Rogan was doing his thing, having a long format show, relaxed atmosphere, not PR managed, and just drink with these guests or smoke with these guests. But now everybody's doing it, so it's not cool anymore. People need answers. People need improvement in their lives. We need more security. We need real geopolitical decisions. And so it's just being the entertainment kind of guy who's also a bit political. It's not cool anymore. It doesn't work. So Rogan eventually caught on to that. It's not the cool character doesn't really work so well anymore. And now he also wants to be seen as smart and passionate, but he constantly makes mistakes with the topics, or his guests turn out to be trash. Nothing Rogan says is ever original, and everybody else can be, emotional and passionate. So it's kind of, to be the cool dude, yeah, it does get you attention, but it's worthless. There's no point to it whatsoever. If you want to be seen as a super smart intellectual, it's a bit harder to do. But, you can pretend. People, if they're slightly above average intelligence, they can pretend. You wear the clothing, the mannerisms, the speech. That's it. That's the whole gimmick. And also people with, let's say, 125 IQ, they can get some suitable academic credentials. It's not like even Harvard professor has 150 IQ or above, 150 IQ. Sometimes, very, suitable professors, they have like a 125 IQ. So it's not that special. So if anybody, has some academic credentials and creates this persona, creates this character, but there's really nothing really behind it, it's useless. It's worthless. And these people sometimes also want to be seen as cool, but they can't really be cool. Even Elon Musk has been struggling in his quest to be both archetypes, to be the super smart, but also passionate, but also, kind of the cool one. Even Elon Musk is struggling, and he's got all the money in the world. So nobody is like the Tony Stark character in a Hollywood superhero movie. So, and if you're too passionate as the intellectual cliche, it takes away from your intellectual cliche, because if you're super smart, you can't be too emotional. It's kind of like, you're not supposed to mix these cliches, because it takes away from one or the other cliche. And to act like a heated, passionate rebel, you just copy and paste thoughts and ideas and add your own emotions. Facial expressions. Any fanatical Muslim goat herder in the middle of nowhere in some faraway country has emotions mixed in with his ideas. Even dogs have emotions. By itself, it doesn't tell us anything. It's the most generic category. And so Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson, they can never be considered cool. They can never be considered super smart intellectuals. So they play up their supposed integrity. That's the gimmick. I have the biggest integrity. I'm passionate, and I'm stick with these ideas no matter what happens, and if I get into trouble, that just shows the integrity that I have, and it's always just this integrity.
If I make mistakes, I was sincere anyway.
Yeah, and but of course, if you watch their careers, I mean, they've changed a lot and not for the better. So they're one thing, then they're another thing. Some people have dug up an old clip of Alex Jones, something, Israel and the Jews and this and that, and this was like in 2000, around the year 2000, and so he tried to play that.
You mean it was overtly anti-Semitic?
It was just way too much. I maybe I can find the clip here, but it was, somebody dug it up from some archive, and it was way over the top. But then when 9/11 happened, he quickly realized that this is not going to sell. The trend now is to not be too radical, just bring audiences together. Left, right, center, libertarian, classic conspiracy nerds. Just pull them all in. And then tell them, the West is evil,
and then
gradually move over to the Russians are better.
He's a right-wing Bolshevist, as I would characterize Alex Jones.
Yeah. So amplifying these people makes nothing better. People have tried that. The audiences have tried that. Amplifying these people, it doesn't make anything better. Adding more of the same people makes nothing better either. So if you find some influencer on the web you haven't seen before, if a completely new influencer emerges, ask yourself which of the three gimmick categories this person chose to play a character. So what is the countermeasure here? The biggest countermeasure here is abstinence. It's like this content detox. If it's not original and worthy, avoid. Your time is too valuable. It's always the same archetypes. It's always the same content, and it's pointless. It's pointless to try to push one influencer to go against the other influencer if they're all garbage, right? So let's say the left-wing guy says, the left-wing people in the audience, the leftists say, "Oh, I don't like Rogan because Rogan had some right-wing ideas lately, even though Rogan is a communist. I don't like this Rogan guy now. We need to push our own."
Is Rogan a communist? You can't just
he said
by.
No. He said that repeatedly over the years, and people have the quotes, the excerpts. Multiple times he said that he's so far on the left when it comes to sharing the money and just all this classic leftist stuff. He's very much for it because he came from, originally he came from poverty in a damaged family, so he was susceptible for that, and he loves the 60s culture and the music and the whole vibe. And it's like this very old school, let's all smoke and take other substances and all chill and share resources and money and blah, 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 blah. So he's very much into that. He was for the longest time. And he simply adopted some right-wing ideas because he thought that the left was becoming too authoritarian. So he's trying his luck with the right wing, but he's flexible. He will go back to the left if he thinks the right wing becomes too draconian, authoritarian. Because it's always about himself. If he gets to have his pot, if he gets to have this, that, and the other, and his money, he's fine. But he's repeatedly said that very clearly, that he has very left-wing ideas of how society should run and the economy should run. Yeah, so people are mad. People on the left, they used to kind of think he was cool. Now they hate him, and now the left says we need push our influencers to go against Rogan. But if you have like several of these opposing terrible influencers, it's not going to help anybody. This one guy may cancel out some effects of the other guy, but it's all bad. It's all a waste of time. The only real countermeasure here is abstinence. If somebody's playing one of these archetype characters, if somebody is not original, if somebody doesnn't have really their own ideas, avoid. Because there's too much. There's no end to it. There's nothing. You can't talk these guys away. You can't add more. Standard talk to, and try to create new influencers from these archetypes in order to help you. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. If you think only these archetype gimmicks can be successful, so we have to play these archetypes, It's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for you as a citizen. So then, after we've kind of established that there's 3 archetypes of political influencers, just three categories basically. There's only 2 types or two major categories of content nowadays on the web. One category is pure brainless, stupid entertainment, which keeps you from thinking. That's its only purpose. It's not about the entertainment. It's not about making your life funnier. It's not about, entertainment, creating money and blah, blah, blah. It's just about, keeping you from thinking significant thoughts. That's its only function. So that's one category of content, silly stuff to drown out your own thoughts. And then there's political content, or let's say content about relevant topics. And the internet has become a time-wasting and original thought prevention machine. So if you consume too much silly content, it can make a person feel like having some form of ADHD. So your thoughts are racing, you can't get the music out of your head, your brain doesn't function right. It's almost like a bit like a schizoid. You almost get like a schizoid brain or some other neurodivergent problem. It can mimic that. So thanks to the internet, you can get through an entire day without ever thinking properly in your free time. Not even in the bathroom, not on a train, not on a bus ride, not on a car ride, because you ruined your sleep with your late night scrolling, and so it's harder for you to think during the next day. So it's harder for you to think, so you just go back to the stupid entertainment. Now, ideological political content exists for you to simply copy in your head and, at best, fill in some predefined blanks so you falsely believe that you have had your own thoughts and conclusions. It's also a variation of keeping you from really thinking by presenting you every idea as ready-made. Or they give you 9 steps of the whole thing, so you make the last baby step, the 10th step, so you can feel like you've actually done something in your own mind. And so usually young children copy what they see and hear without the ability to think systematically. That's a child thing. Now adults have the same problem. We used to think the internet was just dangerous for kids, but then hordes of adults fell victim to radical content and people even screwed up their lives. And also, if it's not on the internet, it's not on people's minds. That's another thing.
I should make a comment here about what you're saying, because there's a clarification. In ancient Greece, when they had oratory, you had people like Socrates, you had people like Plato coming forward and saying, look, there's a problem with this talking, this constant talking that we do to persuade. And you mentioned, of course, the brainless entertainment, the political content on relevant topics. What this really is, what I found in listening to, when I'm doing tasks, listening to podcasts, and even podcasters I tend to enjoy, is that I find, well, this is repetitive. And then I think about what they're saying, and there's very little knowledge, because knowing something is very difficult. What it is the core meaning, the Greek word doxa, which is a word signifying commonly held views, opinions, which really very often are groupthink opinions. And a lot of times commonly held views are kind of common sense. They're like, oh yeah, of course. Well, you don't need to hear that repeated over and over again, what everybody knows that is true, that is obviously true. But the real content, most of the time, and it gets by everybody, is that this doxa, this opinion, is usually the groupthink of the moment. It is not what people thought some years ago. It's not reality today. It's going to pass away, which is where you get where things are always changing, where the rhetoric is changing. True knowledge and understanding is more difficult. It's not as easy to present. It's complicated. But this doxa is very easy because it gives it's giving the common view that the general opinion that everybody kind of believes already, and is putting an ingenious twist on it that people can feel good inside. Oh yeah, I know that. That affirms what I believe already. That is, people are being reinforced in something, or if it's something new that's wrong, it's sort of indoctrinating people through the repetition of it. And a very common thing that happens is, like in the war in Ukraine, where people keep saying, well, Ukraine is corrupt. Ukraine is corrupt and they can't win the war. Look at how much bigger Russia is. People like Douglas McGregor made this into a kind of self-embarrassing prediction. Oh yeah, Ukraine, 10th day of the war, Ukraine is out of this war, and the war's over in 10 days. That was 3.5 years ago, by the way. And Ukraine has killed 1 million Russian soldiers, and they've probably killed 4 or 5 times, some counts 6 times the number of Russians have been killed than Ukrainians have been killed or wounded. So you have these truisms that just aren't true. They get repeated, and nobody goes back and says, to even somebody like Jordan Peterson, who did this video in July of 2002 saying that Ukraine should just be given up. It really belongs to Russia. I mean, it lasted for like an hour and a half. It was very long. And I listened to it just dismayed, but he did it in a 3-piece suit and with his usual dignity and flair.
And the lighting.
And it was all nonsense, right? So it's doxa. It's just opinion of a particular group, a group think, and it was run. Of course, these people who are somehow attached to Russia, who like Russia, they come up with this nonsense, which of course everybody, you're pro-Republican, you're pro-Democrat, you're pro-whatever, you're rah, you treat it like a football game. You get out your little flag, the cheerleader comes out and dances up and down. But that's not really intellectual content. That's not knowledge or understanding. And so what the two things that you've said are the content are brainless entertainment and just opinions that are very, very questionable in most cases.
Yeah, and I always, I've published my first material, so to say, more than 20 years ago. And I always made significant effort, for my audience. I mean, and over the time, I become more professional, and there was more effort that I put into it, and I covered all these things, and it was usually, X amount of hours of preparation for a show that lasts 90 minutes, 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. So there was like squeezing, let's say, maybe 10, 15 hours, sometimes more, into 2 hours, just condensing it in a specific way. And it was even more that went into that one show, because I wasn't only spending like 15 hours or 20 hours to prepare this show, but I was always, I was also, I spent years and years and years before that learning all the stuff that went into this particular show. So it was more than just 15 hours, but it was just specifically for a specific episode. I would spend another 10, 15, sometimes 20 hours to prepare it. So this was always like my approach, and this is what talking is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, there's supposed to be an effort behind it, and this is a sign of respect to the audience. And what I saw for so many years was other influencers essentially disrespecting their audience by playing characters and repeating that garbage that they had picked up very, very quickly. Because it's the easiest thing in the world. You visit some specific websites, you check out what's happening on specific social media channels, and you just copy and paste these ideas. There is your script.
Facile and inauthentic.
And there's your script, and that's all you're gonna do. And then you have a guest on or a co-host, and then you just you toss the ball to the other guy, tosses it back, and blah blah blah, and that's the show. And it felt so
but you
disrespectful.
find out, the thing that really troubled me, because I want to know something. I want to figure something out. And the thing that's so exasperating about this whole field is that when you boil it down, most of the time, 95, I don't know, 90% of the time, what you're hearing, these opinions, if you really want to understand it in context, they are opponents of real knowledge, because
like
they are
hatred.
preventing the audience from really knowing anything, but they're giving the audience the idea that they really do know
Abundance,
the
the illusion of abundance.
The illusion of abundance. That's a good way of putting it, because there's really a poverty there. There are things you know, and things they repeat that everybody knows, and you don't even need to repeat it. But that is really couched. The real message, the new items in it, are usually just plain wrong.
And it's like the more I respected my audience, the more difficult it was to connect with an audience or grow an audience and connect to more people. So it's almost like diametrically opposed. You respect the people, you show that respect by challenging them, by making this effort to be original, and even just pooling the most interesting original ideas that are out there but not widely known, trying to pull the pieces together. So the more I respected my audience, the more problematic it became, because the audience ironically felt disrespected. And
it's also a matter of self-respect, is it not?
Yeah,
also
exactly.
a matter of self-respect.
Exactly.
Yes.
I could never do garbage. I would completely hate that. I would hate that. I would rather do something else. But I saw other influencers. Many influencers completely disrespecting their audience, but their audience felt valued. They felt respected, even though they were being disrespected. That was kind of the biggest nonsensical, counterintuitive, counterlogical effect that I observed over the last 20 plus years. If you respect people, they feel disrespected with those kind of topics. If you disrespect them, they feel respected.
Well, it turns out the value of discourse, and I go back to one of my favorite characters from history is Socrates. The most important thing about discourse, and this is Socratic dialectics, is to be able to test the doxa, or the opinions, the prevailing opinion, because what is the really important thing is that when we as a group, as a nation, as a people, as a class of people, as a group, have something important that we think that's wrong, that's where the correction needs. Because whenever you think about your life, whenever you've thought something wrong, something that wasn't true, and it was an important thing worth discussing, and your life is organized around it, if you have that thing wrong and you really believe you're right, you're headed for a kind of disaster. You're going to have something coming down the pike that's going to hurt you and the people you love. So this is why this is so important. We thought the Cold War ended, right? Back in the 1990s. Oh, Russia's going to be a democracy. Everything's going to be good. We can put away our nuclear weapons. I was saying back then, I was writing and trying to tell everybody who would listen, this isn't true. This is way wrong. And I couldn't people would just like, what is wrong with you? Don't you get what's happening? It was so obvious. But yet everybody was swept away in the optimism, in the desire to believe. This is just one example. There's lots of things. It's like I worked in education. I was a teacher at one time. They had, back in the late 80s, when George H.W. Bush had his 1,000 points of light, or was it 1,000,000 points of light? I forget. He was talking, they were going to reform education, no child left behind. Every child's left behind, so that no child is really behind, because they're all behind, right? I mean, I could see the fraud of what they were doing, that they were not they weren't criticizing the education system. They weren't seeing how it was failing. They didn't have a good way of addressing it. They just papered over everything and just poured money over it. And they empowered the wrong people, and they just advanced. I could see the cause of socialism in the education departments in the States. I could see the Soviet style of education getting stronger and stronger. In the midst they're trying to correct, Nobody would speak honestly about what happens in schools, about the way the children are, the way the culture is changing, the amount of cheating going on. Nobody would talk about those things because they were unpleasant. The shopping mall regime just wants good stuff, right?
And even if you, I mean, the internet, for a while, the internet was, I mean, it goes in both directions, right? You send things out on the internet, you publish your content or whatever, but you also get stuff from the internet. You download, the websites from the server or the audio file and video file. So it's both directions. And for me, obviously, sending stuff out, that was kind of the easy, straightforward thing. But at least in a baseline concept. But getting stuff out of the internet, that was the tough one. That was the difficult one because it's an ocean of garbage. You have to find clues and some good stuff, and that leads you to, if you have a good method, it leads you to better material. And ultimately, you want to find the good stacks of books that are going to get you further. That's gonna benefit your research. They're gonna create progress. So ultimately, it was always about finding the right books. And a website was just, for me, just a step on the way to finding that great book or the other great book, right? It's like that was the internet. In my heading in my direction, that was all the internet was for me. It's just a means to an end. It's just a way to look fishing expeditions so I could get stacks and stacks and stacks and hundreds of select really, really good books, and even some terrible books. I mean, I can get something interesting, have some interesting thoughts of my own if I read a terrible book. But and also if I watch something that's terrible on the web, or I listen to something that's terrible on the web, I can
there's another
something out of it.
Thing you mentioned books. Thomas Sowell wrote a book on intellectuals, and in that book he said, look, an intellectual, the definition is they're people that produce ideas. They work with ideas. They produce ideas for their living. They're journalists, they're writers, they're professors, they're scientists, whatever. They work with ideas. The problem is that intellectuality is not wisdom. Wisdom is much more difficult because ideas ideas don't have to be correct. They don't have to be right. They can be harmful. Ideas can be like bombs. They can blow you up. You adopt the wrong idea in your life, and your life can become a mess from that idea. And so, of course, the term pseudo-intellectual is really almost a pleonasm because intellectuals, there's nothing about an intellectual that mandates that his ideas have to be true. They are, and so the false ideas, most intellectuals believe things that are absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and also
have believed it in modernity.
Yeah, I think a lot of intellectuals they play with ideas that are usually not their own. It's mostly I've read this and I've adopted that and I just repeat stuff, right? This is kind of the
originality is rather difficult.
And they kind of try to create this fake verification method by pointing at history, even though they're not good at history. They don't really understand history. They haven't gotten really into history.
Well, it takes a lot of time
and they say my current idea that I want to use for the present and the future, this idea must be right because it was proven right here and here in the past in history, but they cannot really judge history.
They don't really know. That's because the judgment. See, there's the thing. Wisdom. Here's what Thomas Sowell defined wisdom, and I loved his definition. He called it the rarest quality of all, and it's the ability to combine intellect, knowledge, experience, and judgment to produce a coherent understanding. Isn't that beautiful? And that is how much of what we hear is coherent. How much of it involves, how good is the judgment of the people involved? This is the thing about, Jordan Peterson, you said he was an expert in addiction. And he himself became so badly addicted, he almost died and he had to go to Russia for a cure. a rather sudden cure. So, how do you become addicted to a substance that changes your mind, that basically alters your brain, when that has been your field of a day? This is really hard to understand for me.
What there are, there are. I personally have seen and even met medical doctors, really, really good in their particular field, but they're very unhealthy people. So they
very unhealthy, fat or whatever. Yeah.
Very unhealthy themselves, and it's like, it's easier to talk than to do. There's this joke: if you can't do, teach. So because a lot of coaches, they cannot really do themselves what they teach, or they failed.
Well, it's Adam Smith never ran a business, and Karl Marx never administered a gulag, right?
Yeah, or handled Marx. Marx never handled
the ideas.
Karl Marx never really handled money well, not once, and he never really had a great relationship with people in general, yet that he is regarded as the guy who teaches us how humans should interact with each other and how humans should handle money or value or resources. It's like, and so the internet for me was always just... A
psychopath is going to teach us how to love each other and to live in this socialistic society, right?
So for me, the internet was just... in the outgoing direction, it was just a way for me to reach an audience, and in the other direction, it was just a means to an end. It was just a tool to get to the real good stuff, which is physical books, which is outside of the internet per se, especially if these books are older than the internet. So or were created without internet trends, without any of the control, without the controlled garbage that became so dominant on the internet. So it was just a tool for me, a means to an end. But even the usability of that tool now is almost zero. Search engines are useless. AI chat. If you want to understand how we're being manipulated, how we're being subverted, type into a search engine, how does subversion work and how blah, 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 blah. And what you get is, first of all, in Google, a chatbot answer based on some websites and a bit of Wikipedia. Then you can find Wikipedia and Wikipedia entry. You can use
the
Wikipedia.
Data there is contaminated because the communists have gotten into the data and have placed false narratives there.
And even if sometimes you can use a Wikipedia entry to get some of the basic names and dates. But then you have to get real books to flesh it out and really get to know the topic. Or maybe there's some decent books mentioned in the footnotes, but you actually have to get these books in a real physical copy would be best, because not every book is on Kindle. And so the internet itself is mostly useless. So you want to find something, you can't find it on the internet per se. You cannot find it. And if you don't have it in your bookshelf, you don't have it. If you don't know anybody who can tell you about these subjects or lend you some good books or recommend you some good books, you don't have access to that information. You are isolated from the relevant information. The internet is useless to you. Now, AI chatbots, they manipulate and are mental crutches, and there's so many weird people that program these chatbots, and people are too tired or too untrained to even look around the internet, maybe find a good book on a topic. No, they want the chatbot answer, but it's a skewered answer. It's a bluff. These models, they can do certain things very well. They can go through a transcript of a Teams meeting and then tell you in bullet points what the meeting was about so you can share it with somebody else. Or mathematical stuff, that's for, these algorithms. But real world complex things, that's when the chatbots are usually, that's when these AI bots are terrible. And so we're in a situation right now where this technology is ubiquitous, everybody has constant internet access, but you never hear anyone say anything original. The influencers copy from some place, and people out there, they copy what the influencers are saying. Everybody's just copying. Nobody says anything original. If I hear somebody say something to me, with my knowledge, I already know, okay, yeah, I know where he got the stuff from, and I also know, I know the topic, so I know how this particular bit of propaganda, how to judge it, where it came from, who designed it, and how they designed it. So it's always like, you never hear anyone say anything original. It's always copied from TV or the internet. And almost everyone picks one of the same 5 baseline controlled ideological main categories: left, right, the political middle, the Enlightenment, libertarian, or traditional conspiracy lore. It's always the same 5 categories, and they can be easily subverted with these psychological subversion operations. And especially the Russians, they, at a very early point, they made it a science to understand the West and to understand the different minds of different peoples, not just how the French are different from the Germans, or how, the British are different from the Germans, or the Americans are different from the Germans, or how people in the southern states of the U.S. are different from, the East Coast or the West Coast or the North. It's getting down to the individual character traits, even to a genetic level, and calculating who is a member of what group, because a person feels more connected to a certain ideology based on that person's personality. And so calculating who is a target audience, what his psyche roughly is, then what this person is sharing on the internet, what he likes, what he doesn't like, figuring out the target person, the target audience, and then sculpting the propaganda, infiltrating these 5 political ideological categories, and then directing people in a specific direction you want them to go in. So many people understand they're being exploited, everything is too expensive and the taxes, but when they try to rebel or change anything, they fail at the first stages of understanding the problems and what to do about it, because all they know is this manipulated ideological thinking. At best, you can connect to people from the same ideological movement, which is a fraction of the population, and then you have to deal with competing factions within this ideological group who all have copied somewhat different thoughts. It's a game you can't win. And the subversion strategy became, to a large degree, about rage baiting. So you tell every one of those 5 groups to hate the other groups, but also within a single ideological political group, you tell these different factions to hate each other. This is one of the major aspects that diversion game, rage baiting. But you also have to combine different groups again for specific ideas, such as let's abandon Ukraine, let's give Russia what it wants, let's trade with Russia. So it's about isolating groups, making them incompatible, yet finding specific common ground and try to use that to further Russia's goals. Because at some point, because that's always the goal, if Russia wants to take over new territory, let's say Europe, Russia wants to take over Europe, they don't want these single coherent groups out there in Europe that they have to control. No, they want these splintered, fractured groups out there that cannot really work with each other. Because that's easier for Russia as an occupying force, that's easier for Russia to control, and then to further subvert. Because once you are under that new government, that new, for example, Russian control, they can then apply the next stages of the program, specific for every single group that was cultivated. Middle, left, right, libertarian, conspiracy lore. Because the occupying power, in this case the Russians, they know who's a member roughly of what political group, who has what kind of personality. And so this is how an occupation happens. easier, and then a transformation. Because in one generation of occupation, you want to eliminate the troublemakers, and you want to shape and shape and shape so these people, these subjects, become very, very loyal to the system, and they do what you ask them to do. So, 5 types of political content on the web, 5 categories, and they're all infiltrated. They're all used for subversion: left, middle, right, libertarian, and conspiracy lore. Now, with the left, obviously, Russia is still the dominating force when it comes to the political left in the West, even though they don't want to advertise that. They want to pretend to be a hybrid nowadays. They wink towards the left internationally. That's what the Russians are doing. But they're doing it in a certain amount. They're giving the left internationally just enough to keep them motivated, to keep them, in play, to tell them, it's we're gonna bring back Marxism, Leninism. Just don't say it out loud, because we don't want anybody to say it out loud. Just stick with us. It looks super right-wing right now, but it's really not. So this is kind of the infiltration of the left. Then, with the political middle, this is the subterfuge and the subversion basically is empathy ploys and fear ploys. That's all you get. This is like your politician or your political influencer who doesn't want to appear radical. He doesn't want to appear to take sides. He wants to appear intellectual. He wants to appear like he cares and has integrity. But he's using empathy ploys. Shouldn't we give Russia what it wants and have peace? That would save lives. This is how we could end the killing in Ukraine, by just having everybody be Russia's slaves, essentially. And also the fear ploy. Well, if we don't give Russia what it wants, everybody's going to die. We're going to have nuclear war. Everybody dies. That's kind of like your political middle content out there that's infiltrated. Then the right wing, we've talked about, how subversion made the right wing into a caricature. Make it crazy. And then the other category, libertarianism. Libertarianism never became a real comprehensive science of freedom. It simply repeats certain points. Having freedom is awesome. Trade and corporations can create cool goods based on availability and demand. Taxes are bad because governments waste money, always demand more. So basic stuff. And it never really progressed. It never really changed that much. In its most radical form, libertarianism demands that everything is for sale, even the police and the justice system. And ironically, even libertarianism itself as a movement could be bought, and was indeed bought, by some extremely wealthy people and some Russian intermediaries.
And the Russians, I should mention, the Russians got involved with the libertarians. And you look at a lot of libertarian opinion is pro-Russian, and you think, wait a minute, how can that be? Russia does not practice anything like, although they'll claim that Russia is this libertarian country which practices libertarian economics. It's complete nonsense.
Yeah. So it's like, from some Ayn Rand stuff, when Ayn Rand, who came from the Soviet Union, she got on a bunch of amphetamines, and she wrote these lengthy, very emotional novels. The most famous one is about these robber baron types who
Atlas Shrugged, and We the Living was their first novel. I thought it was their best novel, and then of course Atlas Shrugged was the big, thick, famous one.
Yeah, and it's like these super capitalists. They're superhumans, and everybody else is trash. And they go into this valley, and it's secluded, and they just take all their knowledge and godliness with them, and they watch Galt's Gulch, and they watch the rest of society collapse. and this sort of I mean, it's okay if you write it as something that's just mostly emotional. It's just a thought experiment. That would be okay. But people ran with this thing, turned this into a cult.
It very much affected. Well, you had I should mention this. She was a big fan of Ludwig von Mises and the Austrian School of Economics, which, of course, Böhm-Bawerk was the one that first discovered that. And he wrote a book, I have it here, on Marx and his system. And he demolished Karl Marx in that book, of course, kind of brought all the elements together. This is back in the 19th century. Karl Marx believed in the labor theory of value. Well, it's the incorrect economic theory. It's value is determined by the people from moment to moment. They could change. Today, everybody wants a tulip, and tomorrow they want a book. The prices are going to change based on what people want. Relative value is the thing. People change, and it's if you read, I've read Ludwig von Mises's On Human Action and his book on socialism. There's a lot of valuable things in Austrian economics. Böhm-Bawerk is I think better even than Ludwig von Mises, but that school believed in laissez-faire. They believed in liberalism. Liberalism in the classic sense, that is, liberalism as liberty, as economic liberty, right? And so, of course, Ayn Rand, she escaped the Soviet Union. She fled. Her book, We the Living, was really autobiographical about a girl that flees, but she dies when she flees. And of course, you leave your country, part of you dies. She was Russian. That was her language. Here she dreamed of being a writer. She had to write in English, language she didn't grow up knowing. And she did quite well, but she was passionate about capitalism over this. And she did not have a very good understanding of Austrian economics.
It kind of turned
into. She didn't understand the theory really, but
it kind of turned into a cult, because if you turn capitalism into a cult, the pantheon of capitalist gods would be the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Ford family, and we've done a whole episode on the industrialization of America and how it became like this powerhouse over, starting in like the 1870s, and it turned into this mega powerhouse that was ultimately
It's a complicated story, by the way, which has many dimensions to it and cannot be easily...
and secrets to it that were misinterpreted by the conspiracy guys. And
sociologically, capitalism is problematic because it has created this good standard of living and it's given us freedom, but people have abused it.
Yeah, and also if you're surrounded by, if you are, let's say, the United States, you're industrializing and you're letting things happen, even though they might be a bit problematic. Creating too many centers, big centers of industrial power, and there's too much centralization.
That's not really a problem. Different centers of power is good.
Well, if it's run by sensible people that have a sense of country.
That the money power that you suddenly displaced, and this is Joseph Schumpeter's take on it, and he was Austrian, but I don't think he would be strictly Austrian school. Joseph Schumpeter said that the aristocracy, the warrior aristocracy that built Europe, the backbone of Europe, he called it the steel spine. It allowed liberalism. It was that you had to have something profoundly anti-liberal
to hold everything together. It sounds exactly. Exactly. It sounds contradictory, but because reality is so complex and it just sounds contradictory on the surface.
It does.
Because you have to hold things together to maintain a certain continuity to even have the chance of change. But
I think Jacob Burckhardt explained it in terms of culture, the state, and the religion, the church. And he said the church spiritualizes man. The culture provides everything for man. I mean, it's the economy, it's art, it's literature, it's everything. And then the state defends man against enemies, foreign and domestic. The thing is that which comes first? Well, you have to have a faith, you have to have a belief, which is the foundation, the foundational essence of society is its spiritual essence, the spiritualizing essence. But the state comes next, because the state creates the conditions in which prosperity and art and commerce can exist.
And
if you take away the aristocracy that provided defense and stability, and you have money barons dictating the legislation, dictating the politics, you are going to run off the rails because you don't have a defense anymore.
We cannot have an empathy vacuum. We cannot just demolish humanity and what makes us so special. Because then if we have an empathy vacuum, that's when the radical subversion will try to use fake empathy and weaponize empathy and say communism is all about sharing and empathy, and so we're the good guys and everybody else is just demonic, and so we have to destroy everything that's demonic. And so I think when Ayn Rand was going over the top, she was somehow creating this cult, this capitalist cult. And these characters in her books, they were the pantheon, the gods, the superhumans, and people ran with this idea and they added to it, and it created this hatred for workers and people who were out of luck and just demonizing them. And that was kind of utilized by the communists, claiming we were right. Look at how they treat the masses. We're the solution. Just follow us and everything will be fine. And I've seen this with the younger generations of libertarian activists, the ones who became pro-Russian and more radicalized. They tend to, they tended to change class war theory. A few of them used to be Marxist, but then they supposedly turned libertarian, and they said, well, Marx got class warfare wrong, because Marx said there's the aristocratic class, and then there was the class of people that possess the means of production, the factories,
the bourgeoisie.
Yeah. Well, and so and then you have the workers and the farmers, who are the good class. And there's always a war between these classes, and you have to be conscious of being in this war, and you have to take up arms and fight and win this war from your perspective as a worker or farmer, a regular person. And now some of these radical libertarians, few of them used to be Marxists, they said, now we have a different class warfare theory. We say there's the productive classes and there's the unproductive classes. And sometimes this even gets into this, very narcissistic, overvaluing of money and possessions and just exploiting people.
What is the least productive class, by the way? Babies. And even less productive than that are unborn babies.
Children.
And what have they done? They don't have a right to exist. Let's just get rid of them. And
according to that stupid logic.
Ayn Rand never had a child, and I don't think it's an accident. She didn't really like those ideas. She wasn't really brought into that, and there is a problem because, of course, and she's really she's the capitalist. She's her ontology is materialism. Her objectivist philosophy is a materialist philosophy. If you hear Leonard Peikoff's, lectures, he'll talk against the supernatural. There's no God, there's no goblins, there's no ghosts, there's nothing like this. Well, of course, history reads very different. You can go to any of the great historians of the ancient world, and you'll find that they're telling you things that are really
more than meets the eye. It's
right.
more than just money and profit margin.
Yeah,
more than just and not everything is for sale. I mean, not everything is for sale. Not everything can be should be bought.
No, and see when Burckhardt did his schema for the three elements of civilization, church, state, and culture, he said you have to have a balance of the three. You need the spiritualizing, you need the defensive aristocracy in the state, and you need the culture to make all the values, to make your good standard of living. So you need a certain amount of laissez-faire to let the capitalists run. You need competition between them. You don't want to have monopoly capitalism. You don't want to have mercantilism. You don't want to have totalitarian socialist state control of the economy. And you also don't want to have a theocracy. You don't want to have the priests controlling everything. And you don't want to have a military dictatorship where the state rules everything. You need a balance. The state has to keep in its sphere and not interfere with the church and the culture.
Yeah, it's like it was the easiest
sphere, right?
And of course, it was a very, very clear opportunity for Russian subversion, for these operatives, to latch onto this exaggerated Ayn Rand thing, turbo capitalism. Let's just squeeze people and just make money.
Not understanding how destructive that capitalism is to the state and the church.
And everybody who is everybody who is not at least living comfortably is a loser and deserves his fate and blah blah blah. So it was easy for the Russians to infiltrate that libertarian movement and then say, look over there in Russia. In Mother Russia, we're now conservatives and we have corporations. Of course, they're fake corporations. It's all KGB, every one of those gas companies and media companies and telephone companies and whatnot. But
they're all controlled by Putin's friends.
But the propaganda was, look, it's the same kind of super people, the superhumans, as in Ayn Rand's novels. And over there in Mother Russia, they run everything. It's like the because they are the state somehow. These private robber barons in Russia, they are the state, and so it's like.
But they're really only contract employees of the KGB and
it's like the whole thing
Communist
over there.
Party, Soviet Union, underground.
It's like the upper echelon of Russia, of Mother Russia. These people running Mother Russia. They are Gulch. They are the super valley of the superhumans that have the corporations over there. So it's like
this
the
is where you
easiest thing
get
in the
people
world.
like Curtis Yarvin being pro-Russian, wanting to have monarchy. The Dark Enlightenment.
That's the next thing, because if you go into this ideological shopping mall, the internet, media per se. Only 5 categories, and you look around, and the left you don't like the left. Maybe you've dabbled in the left with the left movement when you were young, but then you found out it's stupid, it doesn't pay, it doesn't make you progress, it doesn't work. So finally you figured out, okay, we need structure, we need order, we need trade. And by the way, I like to make my own choices, I like to make my own fate. So, I like this libertarian thing in this shopping mall of ideologies. So I'm getting into this libertarian movement. But then you get so frustrated because the left is so strong, then some kooky right-wingers are strong, and just a lot of people, they don't like responsibility. They want to be told what to do, and they want to complain about it, but they never want to make their own choices. And people, sometimes when shifts happen in countries, regions, when the old order fails and people have the chance to join something else, what do they join? Soviet communism, national, Nazi, national socialism. They choose stupid crap, and then they make everything worse. So this frustrates libertarians. Initially they have a honeymoon phase with the ideology. It all sounds so cool, and they think they have the answer to everything, but they don't have any political power. And they abhor the idea of political power. And they don't have any real
history. These people lack historical knowledge. Most of them don't know much history, and they don't have an understanding of the political science or the larger sociology of how things, institutions, and people in human society works.
It drives them nuts that there's so many libertarian-minded, billionaires and multimillionaires out there. They got all this money, but somehow libertarian parties, they never make it. I mean, Elon Musk wants to have one, sort of. I mean, Elon Musk said he wants to have the America First Party, which is like what? Technocracy, libertarianism? Who knows? Maybe a blend of everything.
Well, look, the problem is they can't look. All 5 of your categories, right, center, left, libertarian, and conspiracy theory, all 5 of them derive from some kind of bit of knowledge, sometimes a misunderstanding, and they get developed through repetition and finding out what people like to hear. They end up being perfected in these kind of pseudo entertainment, media. In a way, they flatter people, but all of them, they are more and more under the decay of our intellectuality, the decay of the intellect, the decay of the pursuit of true knowledge. They have contain less and less knowledge. They're all doxa. They're all ideologies. And as ideologies, they're mostly engaged in falsifying reality and prettifying the reality that they want to exist, that is never going to exist. That we're not going to go back to having a perfect Christian society where everybody obeys the Bible. That's not going to happen, right? That's not. We're not going to have a laissez-faire capitalism. We're not going to have communism. We're not going to have a state where there are no Jews and everybody's the same color skin, right? I mean, and there's no master conspirators because human beings don't control their own history. We don't control it.
It's like these libertarians over time, they get so frustrated because they don't have any political power, and they also think political power is the devil. So they go in circles and they go nuts, and then they think, or they're being told by influencers, well, we need for the foreseeable future, we need either a right-wing tyranny, but then they pick the wrong one, Russia. They want to go with the wrong one, the Russian dictatorship, or we need to break down the government. We need to just seclude ourselves and just try to demolish every form of government by, being sovereign citizens and driving around with fake license plates and just annoying the police.
This is the libertarian anarchism.
Yeah, and
like
annoying the police and just make and sometimes these people think about terrorism. We're supposed to make everything grind to a halt, so nothing. The government doesn't work anymore. And it's just like ultimately they are being shepherded into the direction of, Mother Russia is the solution. They're going to have this massive dictatorship, and at the end will be freedom at some point.
Well, the problem here is that a country like Russia, the communist, with its history of perceptions management and active measures in controlling opinion, they not only did it in Russia, they exported it to control our opinions, and they became quite good at it. And so when there's no real pursuit for real knowledge, and you have, as you say, these 5 categories of doxa, of ideology, of 5 different kinds of prevailing views, 5 different groupthings, it's very easy then to go, oh, well, this is how people think, or it's not really thinking. This is what they believe. Now we can penetrate those 5 groups. We can seed them with our active measures, with our narratives. We can tweak them, and we can manipulate them to all do the most destructive thing possible to Western civilization, to bring it all down so we can take over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way the Russian strategists think.
Yeah, and so then we have the last of these traditional, infiltrated, subverted political categories, which is conspiracy lore. And I think one of the most profound aspects of that category, the traditional classic conspiracy mythology and the way they're thinking and the way they're arguing and the way they try to prove something, I think one of the biggest features of that group is they are the most woozy when it comes to separating or defining friends and enemies. Because all the other groups, I mean, we know they have these intricate ways of defining, friends and enemies. And of course, they're shifting to their subdivisions. I mean, we all know about the communist movement and all the different groups that battle each other, and then purge after purge after purge. And then Stalin made up his new categories of supposed enemies within communism.
Let me interject where this comes from, this idea that there are no friends or enemies, that everybody can be included. And that's from liberalism in its classic form. What they discovered with capitalism is that people are really alike. When they get opportunity, they want to work. Owning your own business, owning your own farm, whatever, is really great. It makes society richer, and prosperity is the thing. Why should we fight wars? Why should we have ethnic conflict? Why should we disagree over religion when all of us can trade and work together and all get rich, and the world could be one global village of commerce. This was sort of the dream of globalism under the imperial powers in the 19th century, when the first globalist wave occurred, when the world was stitched together by the European powers, colonizing all the parts of Asia and Africa and so on. But you see, the problem is that human beings are tribal, and that is going to assert itself. But the capitalists, they believe the market, and this is the thing about all these capitalists directing politics, is they believe that the market means win-win. We can all have a win-win situation, because they're thinking only in terms of the homo economicus, economic man. Man is an economic animal, and economic activity is his primary activity. And if we all just trade and live peaceably together, you see, we can have this one world wonderful thing. But you see, this is a utopia, just as much as socialism is a utopia, because human beings are tribal. They have different identities. They have different languages, different cultural and historical backgrounds. They don't get along. They don't see eye to eye. And everything in society is, although win-win is a great, beautiful idea, and it does work in capitalism, it does, and it belongs there within one common home, right? One country. But when you get to different tribes and different groups, you end up with these zero-sum games that also come into the equation. And this is where the Russians and Chinese, they don't believe in that win-win. They believe in the zero-sum game, very much so.
Yeah. And it's like when you look at communism, for example, as a category, and how they define friends and enemies, you have a lot of texts written, foundational texts, when they say, well, you have to believe in communism and support communism, or you're the enemy. And then it's like more refined. You have to be part of a specific type of communism, or you're the enemy. So it's not good enough just to be a communism. You have to be a specific type of communism.
Because it's about the concentration of power, right? So and anybody that blocks us from having all the power is an enemy.
So it's shifting, but at least, and I don't mean that in a positive way, but at least in communism, they have these foundational texts and they explain all their garbage, why this is the right group and everybody else is an enemy. So these are friends, these are enemies. So in the right wing, especially extreme right wing, it's kind of the same thing. So Mussolini and some other right wingers, they said, I don't care what you look like. As long as you become a little cog in this behemoth Leviathan machine, you are a friend. If you obey, you're a friend. If you disagree, if you want something else, if you're want to do your own thing, you're an enemy. So, but then the Nazis said, no, we care what you look like. This is our biggest obsession, what you look like. So you may have all the beliefs in the empire and the Roman type system turned into an exaggerated loony bin. You have all these beliefs, but you don't look right. You don't have the right genetics, so you're still an enemy. And there's all these foundational texts that explain these different distinctions between friends and enemies. Libertarians, I've seen some or debated some radical libertarians, and they will even hate you if you're not a specific type of libertarian. If you say, I ran my own business, I love freedom, I know how important it is, I don't like to spend a lot of taxes that are being wasted on nonsense, I want responsibility, people should make choices, but also bear the responsibility, the consequence for these choices, blah, blah, blah. If you live these values, if you're telling these people, I've for years and years and years, I ran my own business, I know what it's like to be a businessman. I'm not just saying some libertarian slogans, how cool business is. I actually lived that day by day. For the radicals, not good enough. Not good enough. If you're not in the radical camp, 0% government, no government, everything is for sale. Let's sell parts of Germany to the highest bidder, even if it's Chinese and they set up their military bases on the coast. Everything's for sale. It's all going to work out. They declare you an enemy. And so people start hating you. So they have these distinctions. Now with the conspiracy group, they have the least amount of foundational texts that will distinguish friends and enemies. This is the biggest wooziness I've ever seen in any ideology. This is the biggest void in any ideology, because I mean, even if you take the most baseline distinction in the conspiracy ideology, Jew and non-Jew. So this is the most baseline radical distinction you can make. So
and they are very obsessive about the Jews, are they not?
Obsessed with Jews, and this goes back to these older foundational texts saying, well, Jewish people or Oriental people per se as a larger group, they have these characteristics and that just makes them who they are. So they're the enemy and we're different, so we're the good guys. But even when you accept that distinction, you still have this massive problem of people claiming this person is a Jew even though he's not a Jew, and everybody's a crypto Jew. Everybody you don't like is secretly a Jew or is secretly working for the Jews. So suddenly you have zero capability of distinguishing friend from enemy. There's no real set of definitions and ways to figure out who fits a definition. So if you say something that some other conspiracy buff doesn't like, he will claim you work for the Jews or you are secretly a Jew. So there's no more real distinction. There's nothing really to hold on to. And it's like every case, every question that presents itself, the answer is always, well, it must be the Jewish conspiracy that's done that.
Right. I got attacked this week on Twitter, on X, by this Victoria, and she was chastising me and another anti-communist, anti-Marxist, that Nyquist writes about Russia, but he won't say anything against Israel. I don't say anything about Israel. It's not my area, but it's like I've missed the whole thing, and I just wrote back, you're obsessive about this, and I don't understand it. Why are you obsessed with this? And she denied being obsessed with it, but all of her tweets, it's always about the Jews. It's the Jews.
We know
doing
exactly.
Everything, and it's like,
and we know exactly. So here's another person who's an activist who went into the shopping mall of ideologies, the internet, and picked one of those 5 categories, and is repeating exactly what this category told her to repeat, told her how to think, and it's like this is the most and
it's not thinking, it's just doxa. They're just repeating really bad opinions, nonsense. They're repeating nonsense opinions that don't have any real understanding or knowledge in them. They're false understanding.
So
they're actually, what Plato said is it's the opposite of understanding.
So this person, so this activist is doing political content. It's one of the 5 categories, and she's playing the passionate type character, the passionate archetype. Because if she's not, or whatever that person really is, whoever that person really is, if that person is not advertising, flexing academic credentials and playing the super smart person, and if that person is not cool or cannot play a cool person, there's only one thing left to play, which is the passionate person. People claiming to be so passionate and so and virtuous by saying these things that they just copied. So again, you meet an activist, and it's one of the 5 ideologies, and probably she mixes in, or that person mixes in, some right-wing ideas, some very baseline standard things as well.
Yeah, they
found on
the
internet.
Can take from multiple columns if they want.
Found on the internet, and it's like, and she's kind of playing this passionate character, right? So I mean, I picked out a study here. This is from King's College London, and it's about And it's about how the Russians are structuring their subversion, what the techniques that they use. And of course, this is an unclassified public study. So you have to go past the introduction and, a lot of talk that is, not really necessary. This is something that in and of itself is shutting out most people, because most people will never even look for studies. And then there's people who may stumble upon a study like this, but they stop reading after 3-4 pages because it's just dry introduction. And it's just, there's not enough substance in there to immediately catch people's attention. So it's a study from King's College London about, psychometrics, but it's almost like the study itself uses a bit of psychometrics to just be accessible for a very small set of people. And it's like people who read this, people who talk like this, they're overestimating their knowledge, they're overestimating their understanding, and they're underestimating the Russians. So again, it's intellectuals, academics. They flex their academic credentials. They name drop things here and there, left and right. But there's not enough substance. And we have to go way beyond what the academics are doing to understand and counter, especially Russian subversion. When it comes to these five categories of ideologies and the characters that we are presented with. Because who's going to read a study that seems so dry when that person could rather listen to Tucker Carlson or listen to Alex Jones or listen to Jordan Peterson? Because, Jordan Peterson sounds academic, so why not listen to Jordan Peterson and feel smart about yourself?
Like an expert. Well, this is the thing. Experts are always called in not to provide factual information, it turns out, although they do sometimes provide that. Or they're called in for this dispassionate analysis, which it turns out isn't always so dispassionate, but they're often used in practical terms to validate people's decisions, right? Politicians use them for cover. People who already believe certain things then say, well, Jordan Peterson isn't a Christian, but he speaks about the Bible, so he's validating my point of view. Or the same thing with Murray Rothbard or Ayn Rand. They validate my belief in the free market. So people bring in these people, they call them experts. They get this expert status because they're already validating something. Again, pointing to Socrates, the value of the intellect, the value of using the judgment and using thought is to challenge these received opinions and to get to the real truth. And it turns out a lot of this exercise isn't about understanding or truth, right? It's about giving yourself cover, whether you're a congressman interviewing an expert who's going to validate your vote on some piece of legislation, or you're a person who believes UFO aliens are coming and, stealing our gonads and running off to Alpha Centauri with them. You're going to find a validation, right? You're going to find an expert to validate, oh, yeah, there's aliens visiting the planet. Or, oh, yeah, really, laissez-faire works better, or socialism works better, or the conspiracy, it's the Jews. See, he just proved it. So it turns out we're at fault, a lot of us, because we don't really listen. We only listen to something that rhymes with what we already believe. And so we're not really looking to be critical. The idea of being critical, intellectually critical, is what might be wrong with my thinking? What might be wrong with the opinions that I'm accepting just without thinking about them? We don't want to do that, do we? We don't want to be in a group think. We don't want to be the Tuesday lunch club in the Johnson administration and micromanage the bombing of North Vietnam, not realizing that we're losing the war, right?
Yeah. So when you read a study like this, and this is supposed to be, King's College, they're supposed to know it all about Russian subversion and how they operate, but you have to read deep into the study to finally get to some, relevant bits and relevant points. And it's like we need to do better than that. We need a better understanding of how the subversion works, how it is structured, because otherwise we just fall victim to it. And it's not good enough to have some academics whine about, oh, there's too much disinfo on the internet. I mean, we're way past that. We're way past that. And so they say things like this in this study, and it's about factors such as volume, precision, speed, obfuscation. So this is kind of like the technological advances benefiting disinformation and subversion. So they talk about going with the trend. Social media and even mainstream media. Social media and mainstream media have become victims whereby they are faced with a dilemma of choosing either go with a trend and opt for half-baked and sensational stories that will prompt more users to engage and bring in revenue, or focus on serious journalism that puts them at risk financially. Okay, yeah, we get that. But why don't we get? I mean, it is possible to make engaging, true and sensational content. It's not like you have to choose between drab, boring, limp-wristed stuff or the sensational, entertaining baloney. You can have it all. I mean, you can have great journalism, you can have great experts, and it can be engaging. They can present some sensational stuff, and it can be turned into a trend. Real stuff, cool stuff, can also be a trend, and it's also the audience and the audience's responsibility to decide what to turn into a trend and what to.
But of course, there's the problem is that unless you have a culture, unless you have you've taught people at an early age to cultivate their minds, to have a kind of purity and intellectual integrity about what is true and what isn't, and to say, oh, I don't really know if that's true. How do I figure it out? If we only had people who did that, but that is actually the exception rather than the rule, I'm afraid to say.
So they say this in the study. Anthony Alcott presents social media features that he refers to as the 6 V's, the 6 factors that can be looked at as game changers in contemporary psychological operations. So it's about volume, a large pool of information that can be manipulated and subverted. It's just the size of the internet and just the amount of stuff that they can be shoved your way. It's the volume. It's a volume problem. Then they talk about the elimination of hierarchy. Information nowadays can come from anyone and anytime if they can log into that social media network and post. So anybody can talk, anybody gets listened to, anything can go viral. And I think it goes back to that that archetype that I described, the passionate guy, because people who are inexperienced, they love to see passionate, supposed folk heroes, regular common guys who have this integrity and they do something and they rise above and they get famous. And, this is kind of the gimmick that Alex Jones had used for a long time, telling the story how he was like a common guy. He was this common guy, but also the chosen one, but a very common guy, but also the chosen one. And also the Joe Rogan types, they were just nobodies really, and then entertainment industry, and then they became the biggest podcaster, and they're so relatable because they smoke pot and they drink just like the people in the audience, and they just goof around, have a good time, and sometimes dabble in conspiracy stuff and blah 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 blah, and it feels so relatable, and anybody can become or can be turned into that. So that's kind of a big problem, and this is a great vector for psychological operations, that we listen to any goofball, we listen to anybody who pretends to be,
knowing that they are drawn to it not out of an interest to find out what is true, but out of curiosity and the vanity of being affirmed in something ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like we need.
Right.
I mean, then there has to be some sort of a. People have to understand what makes status, what makes somebody worth listening to, and what doesn't. It's not just the intellectual university flex. I am associated with MIT or I'm associated with Harvard. And it's not like who has the bigger audience. There's other factors. And so this is kind of a big problem for us in the social media era, that information can come from anybody. Just literally random anybody who's never published anything significant, never had any track record, never put out forth any original ideas. Anybody can suddenly turn viral. Then the factor of veracity. Nobody cares about truth anymore or verification anymore. Vulgarity as a factor. This again means non-authoritative. The rules of power don't apply. Information is from the masses, ordinary people, or it seems like it's from the masses, but it comes from the KGB essentially. Velocity. Information moves at a high speed via the internet. It took 2 years for the KGB operation Infection to reach Africa. It only took 1 hour for singer Chris Brown's tweet on an Ebola conspiracy to trend across the world. 1 hour versus 2 years. Okay. And then the other V factor, verifiability. In hundreds of thousands of updates on social media, the possibility of verifying the authenticity of content is low. Because this is, especially when it comes to conspiracy nonsense or just, blaming Ukraine for everything or blaming a conspiracy for everything, people can always add more nonsensical arguments or fake proof and just add stuff to it. So you're busy debunking
that's one of the problems.
Stuff.
Yeah, but when
There's
people
50 new things.
Yeah, you can't argue with the anti-Semite because he will come up with things that are new all the time and constant. And you're always chasing that tail, and it's like you can't debunk it faster than they can invent it. You just can't. So but once you know the formula is rotten and that the whole approach is wrong, you're dealing with doxa. You're just dealing with opinions and rotten opinions. And you're not dealing with people who are intellectually honest. And you can't, the late Olavo de Carvalho was onto this. You can't debate or learn anything from a conversation with people like that because they are not going to talk to you honestly.
Yeah.
They don't have the same objective coming out of a conversation as you. They just want to rub your nose in crap. Yeah. They don't want to actually deal with any truth.
So a person sitting in a room in London can send a tweet that can be read by someone who has internet and is on Twitter in Juba, South Sudan, at that very instant, and be retweeted to be seen by another person in Florida, United States, who has the person in Juba on their timeline, and the multiplicity goes on. And then come in the botnets. It's like fake personas on the web, and the Russians
generating opinion, sending things virally.
So it's like a building full of people, paid people, and one person acts like they're 1,000 persons. Or they can automate things.
It's really a building full of termites where the termites are eating the building, and as they eat the building, they get more numerous and they eat it faster and faster.
They used to do it. They used to do it in a way that people in a building, they get paid cents, like 10 cents for a comment, a retweet, or something like that. And so they do this all day, and at some point it became automated because these bots, these algorithms, they can do the same job, like a chat bot, and just robo answer, retweet, say certain things, and they have fake names and fake, avatar pictures. And so social media is also cost effective in disseminating psychological operations compared to other tools such as radio, television, and newspapers. Because radio is expensive, television is expensive, newspapers are expensive, but social media, somebody else is paying for the bandwidth. It's Elon paying for it. It's Google paying for it. It's some other social network that's paying for the bandwidth. So the Russians don't even really have to pay for the bandwidth. It's very, very cheap. And then they say this, about the Rand Corporation. Rand's combined network and lexical analysis to identify the structure and content of tweets monitored. The research is informative in the sense that Rand partnered with GNIP, which is now part of Twitter, to get inside insights. And they gathered all tweets between May and July of 2016, primarily in Russian, and whose authors were geographically in the Baltic region. And so they collected, for the sake of the study, they collected about 22 million tweets. 22 million tweets from over 500,000 unique Twitter accounts, with about 150,000 accounts posting pro-Russian content and hate posts about Ukraine. So how many tweets can you send in one day, Jeff? How many tweets can I send in one day? And sometimes, if I dare to copy and paste the same thing on, as a reply to a few people, and even if it's a relevant reply, it's a valid reply. But if I just copy and paste it a few times, my account may be viewed as suspicious for, bot activity. And so I have to do a bit of clicking and say, yeah, I'm a human being. I do original content, blah, blah, blah. And so the account then functions again in a normal way. So they try to fight bots, but it targets the wrong people oftentimes. So if I try to be cost effective, if I try to maximize, exposure, I'm risking my Twitter account. But the Russians, they find new ways of copy and pasting the same stuff. And we've even had politicians, I kid you not, there was a far right-wing politician in Germany and a far left-wing politician in Germany, both relevant figures in the political scene. And they almost simultaneously sent the exact same tweet. Slight differences, very, very slight differences, but almost identical tweets. And they're both pro-Russian, of course. And so that doesn't get caught by, the bot prevention methods, because it's two different people. It's worded differently slightly. And so how can anybody even begin to compete with millions and millions of tweets and counter the disinfo and try to debunk it all and debunk everything? People have to take a hard look nowadays at the internet and figure out it's always the same 5 categories. It's always the same 3 types of influencers. It's all copy and paste, and real knowledge is usually not on the internet. There's almost nothing really of any great substance on the internet. And if you don't have your own library, you don't have access to anything significant. It's not illegal for you to have anything significant, but you choose to not have any significant information in your home because you think it's all on the web. You don't have to actually remember anything. You can look it up. Just type it into a search engine or look it up on social media. It's like, an example is a story of a young boy who was allegedly crucified by Ukrainian soldiers in Slovyansk, eastern Ukraine. The story, which was circulated on Facebook, was later proved to be fabricated. And there was a Facebook post of Alexander Dugin, who had described the same event several days before the alleged boy's mother reported that it had happened. So this is social media nowadays. This is everything. Sometimes it's too obvious, it's too brazen, but everything else is the same. I mean, Dugin cannot be cool. He cannot be a cool guy. He cannot be really the standard passionate guy. So he's trying to be the super smart guy. He wants to be the academic flex type of guy. And so the Russians have studied the target groups, and the Russians have done their own research on us, but they also copied Western research on us. And so they can shape their propaganda, and they can route the resources where it's the most effective. For instance, conservatives have greater degrees of belief in a just world and social dominance orientation. Liberals are higher in openness to experience, and conservatives are higher in conscientiousness. Liberalism is associated with a preference to engage in deliberative, analytical thinking, without real results, and higher scores on tests of cognitive ability, as well as cognitive flexibility, as long as it's in affirming what they believe, and it's not clashing yet with their own reality. Neurocognitive differences between liberals and conservatives have been found in brain areas such as the anterior cingulate cortex, an area associated with, among other things, the ability to tolerate ambiguity, and the amygdala, an area associated with, among other things, negative emotional responses. But of course, there's classified research, and there's data hoarding, and there's these algorithms. So they understand that a lot better. They understand how the different liberals function. What they hate, what they're angry about, what they're bitter about, how they see hope, and there's coping mechanisms. Scientists understand our coping mechanisms, how we deal with stress, how we deal with fear, how we deal with the workload, and there's different ways of coping with stress. There's active ways, there's passive ways, there's constructive ways, destructive ways, and so you can always look at these numbers and try to calculate what's the best way to go for your subversion, right? So the countermeasure would be understand your own brain, your own personality, and try to figure out how an enemy might manipulate you. This is like your own mental firewall. This is just like penetration testing that's being done by IT security professionals. They have a system. They're responsible for a system. It's their system, basically, for all intents and purposes, but they have to try to think like an attacker. I put myself in the mental position of an attacker. I want to get into the system. I want to break in. Where are the weaknesses, or what isn't good enough yet? And it's these weaknesses that we might have, that we have to work on. And it's usually a great way for any subversion activity to mask and relabel a weakness as a strength. So for example, lack of real knowledge. Oh, that's a strength. You are passionate. You don't like them books. You don't like them useless, experts and bookworms. No, you are street smart, and you're passionate, and that's better than being knowledge. Or simplicity. If you simplify everything, they call that a strength. Or overconfidence. That's one of the key hallmarks of every radical ideology, every radicalization. This overconfidence and intolerance. So usually overconfidence is a classic weakness. You just you're not that good at something. You may fancy yourself a sailor or a great mountaineer, but if you're not really that good, if you have overconfidence, you're going to end up in trouble. But subversion will label that weakness a strength.
Yeah. You had the Arctic explorer Scott, who raced Amundsen to the pole, and he wasn't really outfitted to be an Arctic explorer, and the Polar Party died. They died of scurvy on the way back.
Yeah.
Amundsen got back from the pole. He beat him to the pole, and he got back. They ate the sled dogs because they had used up most of their fuel on the way in. They started eating the dogs to get fresh meat.
Yeah.
They made dog stew, and they didn't get scurvy, right? They didn't die.
And in reality, political extremism has already been taken to its extremes. I mean, people have tried that already. They tried to have maximum
people
communism,
are either, it is, I mean, extremism,
maximum
it's either
fascism.
right or it's, I mean, it's either right or it's wrong.
Yeah, and it's like
People want to use the word extreme, but it's either right or wrong. It's truth or not. It's understanding and good judgment, or it's not.
Not even in full-blown communism or maximum fascism, National Socialism, not even in those systems was there really this promised unity and this promised functioning.
Well, Hitler
of the
promised
structures.
unity, but of course he delivered an iron fist against anyone who didn't go along with the right.
Like everybody, I mean, the people who were close to Hitler or somewhat close to Hitler, they knew he was an idiot and he was bizarre and he was overconfident and he was strange and crazy, but you had to be close to him, and so everybody was just waiting for.
They remember they believed in him when he was having success, which was success beyond anyone's expectations. But once reality set in and said, "Wait a minute, we can't take over everything in Europe. We can't hold this down."
And there were many people who wanted to take Hitler's place, and he knew that, and he was so suspicious of everybody wanting to take his place or weaken his position. And there was these people competing with each other. Who gets a spot close to Hitler? Who can go on a walk with him? At the Backhof. Who gets to have these walks with him? Who gets to make jokes around him? So as to influence him. And other Nazis hating each other and scheming against each other and not trusting each other, and weird deaths happen. People trying to kill each other or badmouth someone to Hitler, so Hitler would lose his trust in somebody. Or even the Stalin era. So many people wanted Stalin gone or replace him, and he knew that, and so he tried to replace everybody. He just tries to constantly replace everybody to keep himself in power. I mean, people have tried this to the extreme.
And it's going to be them, right? Stalin.
Yeah.
No problem.
And so there was, just like any cult, I mean, a cult will say, the end of the world is near, it's going to be in 2012, and then it doesn't happen, or the spaceship will come and then it doesn't come, or we will take over the world, but it never happens. And, it just, they will just try to continue itself, propagating themselves. And it's just like with these standard ideologies, when they don't deliver, they don't function. And then decades later, people are trying to revive the Nazi ideology, or they want to just revive communism and say, well, this time we'll make it work. They didn't do it properly the first time. Now we're going to make it work. The whole thing, this whole ideological shopping mall, hasn't worked, and it will never work. And these stupid 5 categories, the way they are right now, the way they're infiltrated, and these 3 kinds of these 3 kinds of influencer types that we're getting, it's not working. And no matter how many podcasts people are listening to, it doesn't change a thing. And you try more radical stuff, it doesn't work. Then you try the more serious stuff or seemingly serious stuff, doesn't work either. You go with the intellectual characters, these actors basically. You try to follow these intellectuals, doesn't work. You go with the radical, passionate ones, doesn't work. And then you get disenchanted with politics, and you want to go with the cool guys, the cool influencers, doesn't work either. None of it works because everything has been infiltrated so much, and also the guys who are just in it for the money. Not everybody who is doing Russian propaganda is really a big fan of Russia. A lot of people are just in it for the money. The money and the status. And so, anything, any current topic. I mean, name any current topic, anything that's on people's minds, and try to run it through this subversion matrix. Okay, so we got this Epstein thing that we talked about. People are still talking about this. There's talk about the Trump government pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell, who used to get the girls for Jeffrey Epstein. There's possible pardon for P. Diddy, the rapper, who seemed to do the same things or some of the same things that Epstein did. There's talk of a pardon there, so it's on people's minds. And what happens? We get the 3 types of influencers who all picked one of those 5 ideologies. They talk about the Epstein case, right? And it goes through this matrix, and then you get the left-wing perspective, a left-wing influencer talk about Epstein and say it's all a right-wing conspiracy, and Trump is totally in on the conspiracy, and it's all Trump's problem now. And let's forget that it's a highly complicated case, and there might be governments involved and counterintelligence involved. Let's forget about that. Let's just have influencers such as Colbert or Jon Stewart, these leftist characters who try to be the cool ones, the funny ones, also try to be the passionate type to some degree, but they're predominantly the funny ones, they try to be the cool ones. They talk about the Epstein case, and they play a character while doing so, and they're coming from one of these five ideologies, and their solution is to just vote Democrat. If you vote Democrat, then you're not going to get this Epstein problem in the future, or a problem like that in the future. Why would you listen to Colbert? Why would you listen to Jon Stewart? It's pointless. It's utterly, completely pointless to people. Even when sometimes they think they score a victory against Trump because they make some jokes about Trump or conservatives in general. Next week there's another topic, and this is a topic when other influencers, they seemingly have the upper hand over the left-wing influencers. I've heard this number. Did you hear about Colbert getting canceled? Stephen Colbert, this famous show.
Yeah, I heard about it. It's about time.
Yeah,
I never thought he was funny.
Yeah, and I heard this thing when the television station or the network, they had this lawsuit with Trump, and they settled, and then Colbert gets fired, and people of course said, well, it's political that he got fired, but then somebody else said, no, his show was ridiculously expensive, and it wasn't really that profitable, I've heard someone say. And then I heard this, this was from Tim Pool, who's more of a new right-wing influencer. It's the guy with the woolen hat. He always wears these hats. And he always seems to be pretty miserable. And he has these other typical guests on. And I think Tim Pool, wasn't it Pool who also had an association with Tenet Media, which turned out to be a Russian front, some sort. And this Pool guy, I think, said, we're not like this Colbert guy because we break even, with our show. And then they gave out some ridiculously high number. It's like an insane dollar amount of revenue that they have to generate each year just to break even, just to pay for all the cost. And I thought, this is a ridiculously high number. I mean, just what is the audience getting for all that money? Same with Alex Jones when he had this lawsuit, the Sandy Hook lawsuits, and they had to give out the numbers in court. And they said, like, $150 million in revenue just from the InfoWars store. That's not even all the affiliate deals and other money coming in. That was just the store over 3 years, something like that. Just the store generating this money. So it's all just eating up money, eating up people's money. It's eating up people's time. But what do you get for the money? What is the exclusive content you get from Alex Jones? What is the thing you get back in return for your money and your time, which is even more valuable than your money, oftentimes? What do you get from Tim Pool? What do you get from Alex Jones? And it's like, okay, so then Alex Jones was talking about the Epstein case. And So here again, we have a guy, Jones. He's doing political content. He's not doing the entertainment stuff, but he wants to do entertainment stuff. He wants to be more like a Joe Rogan. Having more fun, less risk. Of defaming people, less risk of getting sued. So he makes political content. He plays the passionate guy, passionate character. He's from one of these standard political categories, and he talks about the Epstein case and Trump. At first, he was all super disappointed that the case is basically closed now. Was closed by the Trump government. No more, files being released, nothing. And the whole MAGA world was in turmoil. The left influencers were presenting these old clips, partying, the Trump partying with Epstein, and also there was a clip from an old video deposition of Jeffrey Epstein in one of his cases, and he was asked, "Did you ever socialize with Donald Trump in the presence of minors?" And then Epstein gave a non-answer. He's not answering the question because he's invoking his right to whatever, which doesn't really tell us anything. Because if he ever met Trump and he's had somebody walking around in the background who was underage without Trump knowing, would be perfectly legal for Trump, doesn't tell us anything. But the left was using these clips, and then Alex Jones was getting hate from his audience because he was supporting Trump for so long, and all the big disappointment. All these broken promises, all this hype amounting to nothing, really. But then they figured out, the Trump admin is throwing us a bone. They're going to release some documents, maybe. And so then Jones was back on his old track, saying, Trump is still fighting the globalists. Still fighting the globalists. Right? So just flipping the script again. It's going from celebrating the hype, Trump is going to arrest them all, arrest the globalists, to, oh my God, biggest disappointment ever. I'm so mad. Going back to, maybe he's going to save us all and arrest the arrest the deep state, arrest the globalists. And this is every single topic. So now we have Trump positions nuclear submarines following threats from former Russian leader. Again, the story gets filtered through these different types of media outlets, social media outlets. Everybody gives you a completely different take. A take that's always supposed to benefit someone. And nobody's willing or nobody's capable of looking at the whole thing, going beyond the personality of Trump and just trying to look at this thing. And meanwhile, there's this. This is from the Insider. The headline is, "We must not say it's for the war. Hundreds of thousands of Russian school kids are building drones that kill Ukrainians. And they're training things, and they're building things, and they're getting ready to create a whole generation of warriors and workers in the war industry." So while we are bickering with each other, because this guy is a conspiracy buff, that guy's left wing, that guy's right wing, then we have libertarians, and just everybody's playing a character, and we're all bickering, and we're all just going in circles and listening and wasting time on Joe Rogan's podcast. And meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Russian school kids are building drones that kill Ukrainians, are being brainwashed. A whole generation is being raised to go to war against us. And you can't play the same games in Russia. You can't be inside Russia and try to play everybody against everybody. You can't come in from the outside just like that. go into Russia and try to play all the groups against each other, because that's life-threateningly dangerous. I mean, do people see where this is going? And then there's this thing. New Russian law will criminalize internet searches for extremist content. This is from TechDirt. So not just disseminating content that is labeled extremist, it's looking for content.
So somebody like you or me doing research could go to jail because we're researching these extremists.
Yes. Even
we're
if
going to
it's
look
just,
at their content to find out what they're saying, because
even if you never post anything, even if you
this is again, it's against freedom. You know, it's trying to control people's thought with the state. It's so wicked. It's really very wicked.
Yeah. And it's like the Russians. I mean, the Russian government understands its own population, right? So they understand there's different genetics in the population, there's different personalities in the population. There's no you can't force, or you shouldn't force, a single primitive ideology over everybody. Of course, it has to be the government is God, and you can't say anything about government. The government is always right. But there's sub-flavors. There's like they also try to use controlled categories on their own population. And that's why they haven't decided yet to reinstate a fake Russian monarchy. They could do that. I mean, we talked about this before. They still have some old Romanov types running around.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, if you saw Putin with Lukashenko yesterday, the cynicism.
Yeah.
They give
candles.
lip service to this. They're not burying Lenin. They're not going to make a monarchy. They're communists.
Yeah,
they won't bury Lenin. They won't do a monarchy, but they'll talk about it. They'll make people think they would. They'll make people think they're Orthodox.
Exactly.
Putin will get out the little Orthodox paraphernalia and cross himself. You know.
Yeah.
No, it's nonsense. He's doing it because the Bolsheviks know, the communists know that so many people are religious, and they can't make those people against them because they'll lose.
Yeah.
Because people who are religious will oppose them, so they have to pretend themselves in order to defeat everyone. Yeah.
And every year it's the victory parade. It's the great communist parade of defeating fascism and saving the world. And they are the world police, and they made the biggest sacrifice, bigger than the West, and so they deserve it all. And they're the good guys.
Even though they started out as Hitler's partner.
But if you say that now, you go to prison for historical falsehoods, or.
Oh, it was a false. The Hitler-Ribbentrop Pact is now a falsehood, a historical falsehood.
Well, they don't care. They don't care. They will
the
lock
Nuremberg
you up.
trial is now for all of us now, because at Nuremberg they wouldn't allow them to mention that.
They will find some way of punishing you for disseminating accurate historical information. They will punish you for that.
Here they had at Nuremberg Soviet judges when the Soviet Union was part of the partition of Poland with Hitler. I mean, it is really you're guilty for plotting aggressive war. That was one of the crimes.
I mean,
but the Soviets had done it.
Yeah, I mean, our culture doesn't. Our societies, our culture, these people here don't want to access real information. They want to listen to.
You got to exonerate the communists at all costs.
They want our people. They want to listen to Joe Rogan and Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and some other stuff.
Joe Rogan, and I can't get over the fact he's a communist.
They don't want to.
Bothers me.
They don't want to access real information, real books, but the Russians are not allowed to. If they want to do it.
Well, they know. That's why they know books is. Look, they have different ways of controlling us. They make us disinterested. They absorb our attention with fake knowledge, so that nobody looks at the real books. So they never try to gain any real knowledge.
Russia, before our eyes, Russia is turning into a hermit kingdom like North Korea. Some insane bubble of cult mania. Where now
that's who all these leaders always were.
All these children
these people really are.
Well, all these children now are training to fire guns and make drones and make weapons and kill everybody, kill Westerners, and they're all building up this thing. And it's like if Russia doesn't try the big attack in a few months or in 3-4 years, they may try the big one in 15 years, right? Or 10 years, or 12 years, or 20 years. They might actually wait for the next generation to be ready, a whole generation to sacrifice, because they know that this sort of thing doesn't fly with the Westerners. We people in the West, we don't have that sense anymore of sacrifice because we haven't tasted it in a very long time to that degree. But they're just they can cut off the entire internet. I mean, there've been reports on tech websites for weeks now or months now that the internet is completely changed now in Russia. It's almost impossible now to access foreign websites, use VPNs, try to circumvent anything. You can't access anything, or it's harder to access anything from beyond. Western firms have almost completely withdrawn because they were invited once to Russia to put in their servers and the infrastructure. So the Russians would have YouTube. So the Russians would have something that actually runs, that actually functions. But now, no more. It's a cold laboratory nowadays, and the same things that they do to us, they're almost punishable by death now in Russia. If you're inside Russia, if you have any sort of power inside Russia, and you are being caught in Russia creating disunity, you are being pushed out of a window. You drink the poison tea.
Yeah.
They will kill you.
Yeah, they will kill you. They do kill people. Alex, I have to do another broadcast in 5 minutes, so we have to end it, I'm afraid. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This has been Friends and Enemies. And we've been discussing, of course, the 5 different ideologies, types of doxa, and how it fits in with friends and enemies and the narratives that are disintegrating our society. So I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you'll join us next week for another edition of Friends and Enemies. I'm Jeff Nyquist. My co-host has been Alex Benesch. I'm in America, and he's in Germany.